Struggling artist kicked out of car dealership. Billionaire manager returns next day with Escalade Convoy. He walked into the dealership wearing a dusty hoodie, the kind you wear when you've run out of excuses and second chances. His shoes were talking, worn out and split at the soles. In his left hand, he held a creased envelope with a small stack of hard-earned bills. In his right, a USB drive. No briefcase. No designer watch. Just a dream and a quiet desperation. He wasn't looking for a luxury flex. He wasn't there to impress anyone. All he wanted was a decent car, something that didn't break down on the freeway or make him look like a failure every time he showed up to a studio session. He had saved for months. Skipped meals. Pulled doubles washing dishes. Sold his own beats for dirt cheap, just to get this far. But the moment he stepped through those glass doors, the energy shifted. Salesman glanced over, and then looked away. One whispered something under his breath. The laughter started slow, quiet chuckles, then grew louder when the manager appeared. You could feel the judgment in the room before a word was spoken. "Sir, this isn't the kind of place where you window shop." He tried to speak. Tried to explain. "I'm here to buy a car," he said. "I got the cash. I got my ID." The manager smirked. Looked him up and down like a punchline. Then waved security over, just like that. No questions. No discussion. 1 second he was inside. The next, he was being dragged out like a thief. Like he didn't belong. He stood outside, gripping his USB drive like it was the last piece of his soul. No ride. No respect. No music played that day. But the next morning, everything changed. Before the dealership even opened, 7 black Escalades lined up at the front entrance. Windows tinted. Engines purring like quiet thunder. The staff came outside in confusion, their eyes scanning the fleet. And when the back door of the lead Escalade opened, he stepped out. No hoodie. No hesitation. Just a clean tailored jacket, a calm expression, and a presence that stopped time. He didn't say much. Didn't need to. Because this time, he wasn't just a musician. He was the billionaire manager behind the hottest record label in the country. The same man they dragged out had returned. But not for a car. For something much, much bigger. Now pause for a second. Ask yourself this. How does someone go from being humiliated and tossed out like garbage to shutting down an entire dealership just by showing up? How do you go from sleeping in a studio closet with rats under the floorboards to rolling up with a convoy that makes traffic stop? The story you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's real. And it might just shake your soul. Because sometimes, the ones you overlook today will own everything you admire tomorrow. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't looking for screaming fans or $1 million chain. All he wanted was a chance to be heard. A real chance. Not a handout. Not a viral moment. Just enough to get his foot in the door and prove, once and for all, that he had something this world hadn't seen yet. His name? Doesn't matter right now. Because at one point, he was just another face in the crowd. Late 20s, quiet, and tense. The kind of guy who'd zone out in a conversation because a beat was looping in his head. Someone who lived off passion and barely anything else. He'd been making music since high school, writing hooks in math class, skipping lunch to hit the keyboard in the music room. While others chased parties, he chased chords. While they slept, he stayed up dragging and cutting samples, trying to make something out of nothing. Every beat was a piece of him. Every verse was a confession he couldn't say out loud. But passion doesn't pay rent. So when graduation hit, reality hit harder. He bounced from couch to couch. Sometimes staying with friends who believed in him, most times with people who didn't, but tolerated him because he was quiet and kept to himself. He recorded vocals under stairwells. Mixed tracks in basement studios with broken speakers and stolen Wi-Fi. His meals? Whatever was cheap and didn't need a microwave. His clothes? Whatever still fit after sleeping in them 3 days straight. He sold beats for cheap. $5, $10, just enough to keep his phone on. He performed at open mics where nobody clapped. Sent emails to ANRS that never got read. DM'd labels and artists who left him unseen. He uploaded track after track with barely any plays. Still, every morning, he woke up or rolled off the floor and made more music. He kept telling himself, one day it'll hit. One day someone's gonna listen and finally hear me. But behind that hope was hunger. Real hunger. The kind that knots your stomach when you've gone 2 days on half a sandwich. The kind that makes you question if your dream is just a slow way to starve. He watched others blow up off gimmicks. Watched producers with no soul get placements with artists he used to admire. Every door felt locked. Every path felt fake. And still, he stayed at it. Because this wasn't a hobby. This was survival. And while everyone talked about cars and clout, he just wanted one thing, his own car. Not a Lambo, not some rented foreign. Just a used, reliable car that didn't shut down in traffic. Something he could pull up in without borrowing keys. Something that didn't scream broke. Something he bought, with his own hands. No cosigner. No parent helping. No flex for social media. Just a quiet declaration to the world. I did this. Me. No label. No shortcut. Just work. That was the dream. That was the goal. And after saving for nearly a year, after skipping Uber rides, splitting grocery bills, saying no to every temptation, he finally had enough. Just enough to walk into that dealership and ask about something decent. Something small. Something honest. He didn't want to be seen as rich. Just respected. But what he got that day was the exact opposite. And the world would come to regret it. It wasn't much. It wasn't a dream car. It wasn't a statement piece for Instagram. It wasn't a flex, a show, or a moment of glory. It was just a car. A humble, reliable car. But for him, it meant everything. He'd saved for this. For months. 3 jobs, late-night shifts washing dishes at a greasy diner. The endless hours of selling beats online, underpriced, undervalued, but enough to stack up some cash. He spent weeks pinching pennies, turning down every distraction, every night out, every single temptation that could pull him away from the dream. And now, standing outside the glossy windows of that luxury dealership, all he felt was a sense of quiet hope. Hope that he was finally going to make it. Hope that the day he'd been dreaming of, working for, was here. He straightened his dusty hoodie, wiped his palms on his jeans, and walked inside. The cold air inside hit him like a slap in the face. The scent of new leather mixed with the sharp, sterile smell of high-end polish. The place was spotless. Gleaming. The cars, locked in place like trophies, sleek, expensive, out of his reach but still within sight. It all felt so foreign. He took a deep breath and walked to the nearest salesman, who was busy chatting with a colleague. The salesman paused for just a second, glancing at him, and then quickly sized him up, like a piece of garbage left in a spotless room. His eyes scanned the worn hoodie, the scuffed shoes, the tired face. He didn't even need to say a word. The judgment was instant. "Can I help you, sir?" the salesman said, his voice dripping with false politeness. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, I've saved up some cash, and I'm interested in buying a car." The salesman barely looked up. "What kind of car were you thinking about?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Something used. Reliable. Something I can afford." He felt himself shrink under the salesman's gaze, suddenly aware of his lack of experience in such places, his rough hands that had never held anything but old instruments and cheap headphones. The salesman's eyes flicked down to the envelope in his hand, and then to the USB drive peeking out of his pocket, and that was when the sneer appeared. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden. It was clear as day. He didn't even bother to hide his disdain anymore. He glanced back at his colleague, who was clearly just waiting for the moment to judge him too. The salesman turned and muttered something to the colleague under his breath. Then he looked back at him. A sarcastic grin stretched across his face. "We don't usually do test drives for people like you," the salesman said, his tone as icy as it was dismissive. "Excuse me?" he asked, almost choking on the words. The salesman leaned in a little closer. "Yeah, you heard me. You're not exactly the type we cater to here." He felt it then. The sting, sharp and sudden, like being stabbed in the gut. His heart raced. His face flushed, but he didn't back down. This was his moment. This was his shot. He tried to hold it together, the weight of every sleepless night pressing down on his chest. "No, he fumbled for words, pulling the small USB drive from his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly. "I've got this. I make music. I've been working on this for years. I saved for this car. I can pay cash. I'm serious." The manager, who had been lurking in the background, overhearing the conversation, came over. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he walked up to them, and the moment the salesman stepped aside, the manager's eyes met his, cold and calculating. "You know, we get a lot of people who think they can just stroll in here with a couple $100 and expect us to drop everything," the manager said. His words felt like a slap to the face. "This isn't a place for dreams, kid. It's for people who actually have money. Real money." He opened his mouth to respond, but the manager raised his hand, cutting him off. "Save it. I don't need to hear about your music." He sneered, glancing at the USB drive in his hand like it was a piece of garbage. "We don't do business with people who can't even make a decent living off their hobbies." He tried to explain again. I'm not here to waste your time. I have the cash. I just need something reliable. I need something. The manager waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, sure. Whatever. This is embarrassing for you. Just walk out before I have to call security. And just like that, the world felt like it was collapsing. The manager's voice didn't even waver as he spoke into his walkie-talkie. Yeah, we need someone to escort this one out, he said, his tone still dripping with that same venomous arrogance. He didn't even have a chance to process it. Before he knew it, two burly security guards appeared out of nowhere, towering over him. One of them grabbed his arm, his grip cold and firm. Let go of me, man, he muttered, trying to pull away, but it was useless. They didn't care. They were already dragging him toward the door. The other customers, the ones with their shiny cars and expensive suits, barely even noticed. Or if they did, they sure didn't care. They didn't look his way, didn't even flinch. He was a ghost to them. Another inconvenience. A nobody who wasn't worth their attention. And then, with one final shove, he was outside, tossed out like trash. The door slammed shut behind him, and he stood there in the parking lot, his heart pounding, his palms slick with sweat. He stood there for a few moments, staring at the polished glass doors. He felt small. Invisible. He felt like the kind of person the world told to just stay in your lane. He tried to breathe, tried to calm his shaking hands, but it was no use. It crushed him. For a moment, he didn't know where to go. His pride was gone. His money? Wasted. The dream he'd been chasing? Trampled in front of everyone. And all he could do was stand there, holding that USB drive like it was the only thing left that mattered. He sits alone at the bus stop, the sound of the city fading away around him. The steady hum of traffic, the distant voices of passing strangers, they feel like echoes from a world that's moving on, leaving him behind. His fingers clutch the small, worn USB drive, the only thing that's left. His only connection to the dream that feels like it's slipping further and further away. The black, cold plastic feels heavier than it should. He wants to throw it away. But at the same time, he can't. It's all he has. It's the only piece of his soul left in this fight. The bitter taste of defeat stings in his mouth. But it's not just the rejection from the dealership that hurts. It's the years of struggle. The countless times he's been told no. The moments when the people around him laughed, mocked him, or simply ignored him. It's the self-doubt creeping in every time he faces failure. He closes his eyes, and suddenly, the flashbacks come rushing in, uninvited, sharp, and painful. The sound of a crowd, loud and unforgiving. The hot lights on his face, blinding him as he steps onto a stage in a small, dark club. His heart is pounding, but he pushes through. He grabs the mic and starts rapping, pouring every ounce of energy into every word, every beat. The crowd doesn't care. They don't listen. They don't feel the pain he's been carrying. They don't see the years of work, the sleepless nights, the dreams he's sacrificed for a shot at something bigger. Booing. It's loud. It's harsh. He can hear the mocking laughter. He tries to push forward, but his voice cracks. The rejection is like a fist in his stomach. His heart races as he grips the mic tighter. But it's no use. He's driven off stage, the sound of laughter and boos echoing in his ears. He never finished the set. He never stood a chance. The flashbacks blur into another moment. He's sitting in a dimly lit room with a group of friends. They used to be his brothers in the grind, the ones who understood. But now, they're all drifting away, one by one. The phone calls stop. The texts go unanswered. They're moving on with their lives, and he's stuck. He's still in the same place, the same studio, the same fight. He spent nights in that same cramped basement studio, working until his eyes burn, until the walls feel like they're closing in, creating music that no one listens to, producing beats that no one buys, trying to build something that everyone around him tells him is pointless. The cold wind blows through the bus stop, biting at his skin. He barely notices. It's as if everything else around him has faded to black and white. The only thing in color is that tiny USB drive in his hand. He tries to breathe, but the weight of the silence presses down on him. It's a silence that echoes in his ears. A silence that's been there since the beginning. A silence that says, "You're not good enough." He thinks about the moment when he first got serious about music. He was just a kid then, wide-eyed, hungry for success. So many promises. So many dreams. But now he's here, at a bus stop, alone. His dreams feeling like distant stars that he can't reach, no matter how hard he stretches. But then, something shifts inside of him. It's small, almost imperceptible, like a spark in the darkness. His grip tightens around the USB drive. He doesn't look at it. He doesn't need to. He feels it. He feels the music coursing through his veins. He feels the fire that's been burning inside him since the day he first picked up a beat. The fire that refused to die, even when everything around him told him to quit. No, he won't quit. Not now. Not ever. He swears under his breath, the words slipping from his lips like a promise. A vow to himself. They'll know my name. The words hang in the air, louder than anything he's said in a long time. They're not just words. They're a declaration. He can feel the weight of them, like a shot of adrenaline coursing through his body. He's not done. He's never been done. The bus pulls up, and he doesn't even notice at first. He doesn't even care. The door opens, but he doesn't move. His mind is a whirlwind of thoughts, of dreams, of unfinished business. The driver gives him a strange look as he stands there motionless, gripping the USB drive like it's a lifeline. Finally, he takes a step forward. But before he boards the bus, he looks back. One last time. The dealership. The rejection. The shame. It's all there, but it's fading. The weight of it is still there, but it's lighter now. He's carrying something different now, a new purpose. A new hunger. The doors of the bus close behind him with a soft whoosh, and as it pulls away from the curb, he knows. He's not just riding to the next stop. He's on his way to something bigger. Something that no one can take from him. In the months that followed the bus stop, something shifted inside him. The cold bite of rejection had cut deep, but it also ignited something far more powerful. A hunger. A fire. He wasn't about to let the world write his story. He'd write it himself, in silence, in the shadows. The city he moved to was far smaller than what he'd imagined. No bright lights. No expensive cars. No flashy dealers or luxury showrooms. Just another quiet corner of the world, full of people who didn't know his name. And that's exactly what he needed. He needed to be invisible. He rented a small, unassuming apartment in a rundown part of town. The walls were thin, the floors creaked, and the rent was cheap. But in this space, he found the quiet he needed. The peace to focus. No distractions. No expectations. Just him and the music. In a city full of people chasing the same dream, he was determined to make it, but on his own terms. The first step was taking a job behind the scenes, working in a small studio for next to nothing. Long hours, sometimes stretching into days, his face hidden behind a computer screen, his hands moving quickly between the keys, mixing, mastering, crafting beats for artists who wouldn't even know his name. He wasn't there for fame. He wasn't there for applause. He was there to work, to grind. The studio wasn't glamorous. It was cluttered with old equipment, dusty vinyl records piled up on shelves, and a faint smell of coffee that never quite went away. But this was where the magic happened. This was where he could create something real, something raw. No spotlight. No cameras. No stage. Just pure sound. For months, he worked in silence. Behind closed doors. Behind the curtains. No one saw the hours he spent alone, crafting songs, perfecting beats, mixing sounds into something people would love, but they wouldn't know it was him. His name didn't matter. His art did. He produced a track for an unknown artist. At first, it seemed like just another song in the pile of hundreds he'd made. But there was something about it. It had a hook that people would feel, a rhythm that would make heads nod. He sent it out, not expecting much. The world had already ignored him before. Why should this be different? But the track went viral. Fast. It spread like wildfire through social media, hitting playlists, making waves in underground circles. It wasn't long before someone noticed. An investor. A businessman with deep pockets, eyes for talent, and a nose for opportunity. He heard the track, saw its potential, and immediately saw the name behind it. Ghost name. He reached out, intrigued, offering to partner with him. No flashy promises. No grand speeches. Just a simple opportunity. You've got something. He built a label from the ground up, silently. No big announcements. No press conferences. He signed a handful of unknowns, but he knew that the true power was in the sound, not the faces. He developed his own artists behind the scenes, crafting their identities with precision. Their success was his success, and his sound became the glue holding everything together. A movement was born, and nobody knew it was him. His tracks, his beats, his signature sound were everywhere, but no one knew who was behind it. It didn't matter. He didn't need the credit. His music was spreading, growing, becoming a force in the industry. Fast forward. Billboard hits. 4 of them. Tracks he produced, crafted in the quiet hours, songs that played in clubs, on the radio, at parties. Songs that people didn't realize had come from a man who'd once been laughed at, pushed aside, humiliated. Now, his beats were inescapable. His name wasn't on the tracks, but his influence? It was undeniable. It was a quiet revolution. The industry was waking up to something new, something that felt raw, real, and fresh. A sound that had come from the bottom, built on hours of hard work and silent grind. His music was more than just tracks. It was a movement. But the most incredible part? He wasn't done. He hadn't even reached the peak. This was just the beginning. The artist's rise wasn't just a story of one hit. It wasn't just about a few viral moments or a handful of radio spins. It was about something deeper, something that would change the entire game. It was about showing the world that success didn't have to come with a flash of light. It didn't have to be wrapped in shiny packages or big headlines. It could come from the shadows, from someone who wasn't afraid to work in silence, to build in the quiet spaces where others would never see. And as the world listened to his music, as they danced, as they sang along to the tracks they didn't know were his, he smiled to himself, knowing that the game had changed forever. But he also knew something else. He wasn't here to settle. Not yet. He was just getting started. The morning sky had barely begun to lighten when the first rumble of engines broke through the usual quiet hum of the city. The streets, normally packed with commuters rushing to start their day, suddenly slowed to a crawl. It was as if the world itself had paused. And for a moment, there was a strange, almost surreal calm. 7 black Escalades, gleaming, powerful, and unmistakable, rolled up to the very same luxury dealership where the artist had been humiliated months before. They lined up one after the other, sleek and imposing. The sound of their engines echoed through the streets, sending ripples through the morning air. People stopped and stared. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Others just watched in disbelief. This wasn't a typical arrival. There was an energy in the air, something electrifying, something that said the rules were about to change. Inside the dealership, the staff had already started to notice. The quiet hum of the showroom was suddenly replaced by hurried whispers. The salesmen, the managers, and the attendants glanced out the window, their faces registering confusion. They had never seen anything like it. Who was this? What was going on? The cars looked like they belonged to someone important, but they never imagined they'd see anything like this pull up to their front door. People began to gather outside, forming a small crowd. Some were customers, others curious passers-by, all drawn in by the mystery unfolding before them. The luxury cars, parked perfectly in line, seemed almost out of place in the quiet dealership. It was a stark contrast to the usual parade of expensive vehicles. This was different. The dealership manager, the same man who had dismissed the artist months ago, stood by the window, staring in confusion. His eyes squinted as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He hadn't seen anything like this before. It wasn't until the door opened that he started to piece it together. Out of the first Escalade stepped the artist, now dressed in high-end designer shades, a perfectly tailored suit, and a confidence that seemed to radiate off him like a new aura. He moved with purpose, each step deliberate, a stark contrast to the hungry, uncertain man who had walked in here months before. He wasn't the same person. The manager, now visibly startled, walked toward him without thinking. His face shifted from confusion to embarrassment as he tried to place the man in front of him. He glanced down at the suit, at the Escalades lined up outside, and then back at the artist's face. His mind raced, but for a second it couldn't connect the dots. Who was this? His lips moved, but the words were slow to form. The arrogance he once carried was gone, replaced by a nervous stutter. "Can I help you, sir?" His voice lacked the cocky edge it had when he had dismissed the artist months ago. Instead, it was uncertain, almost apologetic. The artist didn't reply immediately. Instead, he just looked at the manager, his eyes calm, collected, as if he'd been here before, as if this was all part of a plan. He let the moment hang in the air, the silence stretching between them, until finally, he broke it with a simple question. "Can I test drive today? Or do I still look too broke?" His voice was smooth, but the words hit with the force of 1,000 blows. The manager's face drained of color as he finally recognized the man standing in front of him. It was the same person he had humiliated just months ago, the one who had come in wearing a dusty hoodie, clutching a USB drive, hoping for a chance to be heard. The same person he'd laughed at, dismissed, and kicked out like an afterthought. But now, there was no denying it. The artist had arrived, and he wasn't here to beg for a seat at the table. He was here because he had earned his place. The manager opened his mouth, but no words came out. The stammering apology he was about to give died on his lips. He realized, too late, that the person he dismissed as nothing more than a dreamer had just become his worst nightmare. The artist wasn't just some struggling musician anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with, and that's something no amount of money, status, or fancy cars could change. The artist smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that conveyed victory. It was the smile of someone who had long known he was going to get here, even if the world couldn't see it at the time. He had never been afraid of rejection. He had never been afraid of failure. Because to him, this moment, this very moment, was just another chapter in the story he had been writing all along. "Do I still look like I need your approval?" he asked again, his tone still cool but laced with something the manager couldn't quite place. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't anger. It was simply the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the man who had once been laughed at was now standing in front of the man who had once held all the power, and that power had shifted. It was no longer in the hands of the man who ran the dealership. It was in his own hands now. The silence that followed hung thick between them, the tension palpable. The manager, realizing the gravity of the situation, could only stand there. He had no choice but to watch as the artist, the man he had written off, stepped forward, not as the broken soul he once was, but as someone far more powerful than he had ever imagined. The crowd outside, now fully gathered and watching in awe, murmured amongst themselves. Some applauded, others took out their phones to record the moment, but everyone knew this was a moment for the history books. This wasn't just about a car. This was about a man who had proven that nothing could break his spirit. The manager, his face now red with humiliation, stood frozen as the artist walked past him, his step steady, unwavering. The sound of the artist's footsteps echoed through the dealership, a reminder to everyone in the room that sometimes the best revenge isn't flashy or loud. It's quiet, it's calculated, and it hits harder than anyone can ever anticipate. With one final glance back at the manager, the artist smiled again. This time, it wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. "I'll take that test drive now," he said. "And maybe I'll even buy two." The moment was surreal. The energy in the dealership was still buzzing from the unexpected arrival of 7 black Escalades, the manager still frozen in shock, and the staff reeling from the artist's return. But the real shock had yet to come. As the artist walked through the dealership, his steps steady and purposeful, he wasn't here just to make a point. No, this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about something far more powerful, something that couldn't be measured in just money or status. It was about showing the world how far he had come and how deeply he understood the struggle. Without a word, he walked past the rows of luxury cars, the very ones he had once dreamed of driving, but never thought he could afford. Now here he was, holding the keys to his success. But he wasn't there to flex or boast. He was there to share it. As he approached the sales desk, the receptionist, still in disbelief, tried to offer a polite greeting, but her words caught in her throat. She had witnessed the entire exchange, from the artist's entrance to his question about the test drive, and now she saw him standing in front of her, calm and collected, holding the keys to something far more than just a car. "I'll take 3, he said simply, handing over a briefcase full of cash. The dealer behind the counter was speechless, staring at the wad of cash as if it were a dream, unable to comprehend what was happening. 3 Escalades, all bought in full, in cold, hard cash. But it wasn't just for him. It wasn't even just for his success. He was doing this for those who, like him, had once felt invisible. Those who had worked hard, hustled, and dreamed, only to be rejected by the world. The first Escalade was for him. No one could deny that. He had earned it. But the second and third, they were for others. As the artist handed over the second set of keys, he turned toward the front of the dealership and spotted a young teenager, no more than 16 or 17, standing outside. The kid had been looking through the dealership's windows, clearly wishing he could afford a car like one of these. But like the artist once was, he was stuck in a place where dreams felt far too out of reach. He walked out to the kid, his shoes clicking against the pavement, and for a moment, the teenager didn't realize who was standing in front of him. The artist smiled, and the teenager finally looked up, his face filled with confusion and awe. The artist handed him the keys to the second Escalade, and the teenager's jaw dropped in disbelief. "Here," the artist said, his voice steady and full of intent. "Keep pushing. I was you once. Don't let anyone tell you it's not possible." The teenager's hand shook as he took the keys. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to react. His dreams, the very dreams that had felt out of reach just moments ago, were suddenly in his hands. He stood there for a moment, staring at the artist, trying to make sense of the moment. The artist just smiled and gave him a nod, a simple gesture, but one that meant more than words could ever express. The kid wasn't just handed a car, he was handed a piece of hope, a belief that anything was possible, no matter where you started from. It wasn't just the car that mattered. It was the message: if I can make it, so can you. Inside the dealership, the staff watched as the artist turned back toward the building. The manager, still stunned, stood near the showroom, trying to regain his composure, but his eyes were wide, his face pale. The receptionist, still in shock from what had just happened, saw the artist heading back into the dealership, a slight smile on his face. And as he walked past the sales desk, he placed a demo CD on the counter with a note. The CD was simple, nothing flashy. No name, no logo, just a raw recording. But it was the note that captured the true essence of the moment. The note was short, but its impact was undeniable. This is what you threw away. He left it there, on the counter, for all to see. The receptionist picked it up, her hands trembling slightly, still unsure whether this was some kind of elaborate prank or the beginning of something far bigger than they could ever imagine. But the message was clear. The artist wasn't looking for revenge. He wasn't seeking approval. He wasn't trying to make anyone feel small. What he was showing them, and everyone else who had doubted him, was that the value of something isn't determined by the way others see it, but by how much you believe in it. He wasn't the hungry artist hoping to be discovered anymore. He was the man who had become his own creator, who had fought for his place in the world and had found a way to turn his dreams into something tangible. The rejection he faced, the pain he endured, all of it had led him to this moment. And this wasn't just a triumph for him. It was a message to everyone who had ever been told they were too small, too insignificant, too far away from their goals to ever make it. As the artist walked out of the dealership, heading toward his own Escalade, there was a sense of calm in the air. The crowd that had gathered was still watching, but now they were no longer just spectators. They were part of the story. They had witnessed the rise, the transformation, the quiet revenge. They had seen firsthand that the hunger, the struggle, and the relentless pursuit of a dream could turn the impossible into a reality. And more than anything, they understood that success, true success, wasn't just about winning. It was about giving back, lifting others, and leaving behind a legacy that would outlast the flashy cars and material wealth. For the artist, this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. As the artist drives away, the roar of the engines fades into the distance, but the impact of what just transpired lingers in the air. This wasn't just a man buying cars. This was a moment, a testament to everything he had endured. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every ounce of doubt he'd ever faced, it all led to this. The artist didn't just rise above the challenges. He made sure that the world, in all its coldness, would have to see him now. But it wasn't just about the money, the fame, or the escalades. It was about a lesson, a hard, raw truth about dreams. Never underestimate a dream just because it looks tired. That dream, the one mocked, rejected, and laughed at, was the very thing that fueled him. The pain, the laughter, the shame, they weren't just parts of his story. They were the fire that pushed him to keep moving forward. And as the Escalades rolled out of that dealership, it was more than just a personal victory. It was a message to everyone who had ever felt invisible, who had ever been told they didn't matter. The truth? Some people are too powerful to be recognized in their early form. So the next time you see someone fighting, struggling, or walking down a road that looks impossible, remember this story. What you see isn't always the full picture. The greatest triumphs often come after the darkest hours. And who knows, the person you're looking at today might be the one whose name you'll remember tomorrow. This artist's journey is just one example. But it's not just his story, it could be yours, too. So, if you found something in this video that resonates, something that makes you believe in yourself again, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to like the video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more stories like this, stories of strength, of struggle, and of victory against all odds. Because remember, this was just the beginning.